Hi there, welcome back to Color Quest. This is Margaret Byrd, and I'm so happy to have you here inside of my dye studio, otherwise known as my kitchen. Over the past few weeks, we've been looking at different ways to print or create designs on fiber using some common products that you find in your kitchen. Soy milk has been the star of most of those videos, and we've looked at different ways to apply it as paint and also use it in a resist technique. Today, I would like to go one step further and look at how the tannins in tea can be used in conjunction with another common mineral, and that is iron. We will welcome some dark shades into our printing palette today. So grab yourself some tea and some rusty nails, and let's see if we can't make some beautiful patterns to add to our collection. So one of the secrets in natural dyeing, as well as in the world of botanical printing, is the power of combining tannins and iron or ferrous sulfate. This can bring about beautiful black and dark gray patterns that can enhance so many different types of prints, as well as just bring some very dark shades into your natural color palette. Since we've been looking at tea in our printing process as our dye source, I thought it would be fun to continue that trend and look today at tea as our tannin in this project. Now, we've worked with black tea, but today I wanted to change the palette slightly, and so we're going to be looking at Rooibos. Now, tannins are natural in tea, and therefore they can become the tannin bath. So we'll simply be dyeing our fiber first in a tea bath, this time Rooibos, and then we'll be applying the ferrous or iron to the top of the tannin dyed fiber in order to create patterns or prints. And we'll keep working with the polka dot design so that we can have some uniformity across all of these different cotton pieces. So let me show you a couple of other tannin options, but because tea is so readily accessible, it's a nice place to start. In today's video, we're going to be working with Rooibos, and Rooibos brings about a bit more of a reddish or orange hue, but you can really use any teas that you might want to try. We've been working with black tea, but I figured let's mix it up today and work with some Rooibos. However, if you want to look at some other products that are used in natural dyeing in the tannin world, we have various kinds of tannins that come from natural materials, like gallows tannin is probably the most common tannin. You've seen many videos here where I'm using gallows tannin. This comes from the oak tree. And what's nice about gallows is that it will only slightly color your fiber. You can imagine that the Rooibos is going to create a lovely neutral tone on our fiber. But if you want to have your fiber background be closer to white, gallows tannin is a great way to go. Here are a few others that are used often. Myrobalan is a common one that comes from the Asia region, and it will dye your products a little bit darker, but it is a great tannin source, as well as Terra, which I actually was fortunate enough to have access to when I was in Peru. That is something that's used in Latin America. Also a natural substance. It comes from a tree that has a pod that's then ground up, and this also can create a lighter background. So these are just three potentials of things that you can use for tannin, as well as tea. Now, we have looked at a few other tannin sources here when we've been looking at dyes over the past few months. So things like avocado stones and skins, as well as pomegranate skins, can also be used as tannin-rich dye sources that you can find in your kitchen. So looking at having different options, no matter what we choose, if it's got tannin in it naturally, it is going to have a reaction that will create some darker colors when we introduce ferrous sulfate or iron. So first things first, let's make our tea dye, or in this case, our tannin bath. Make sure that whatever fiber you're going to use, you wash it first. I'm going to be working today with 100% natural cotton, and I'm going to wash it and then keep it damp or put it back into water before I introduce it to the tea bath. Tea bath's going to be nothing more than brewing up some really strong tea in my dye pot and then introducing the wet and clean fiber to allow it to soak for an hour. So let's get that piece done, and then we'll start talking about iron. Now, after you pull your fiber from the tea bath, don't throw it away. We are going to use this as an after tannin bath once we've printed with the iron. So the interaction that we're going to see between the iron and the tannin when we first print will allow us to see where we're printing. And then we're going to pop it back into the tannin bath, which is going to strengthen that interaction between iron and tannins and give us much darker colors. All right, our piece of fiber is dyed in tannin thanks to Rooibos tea and has dried. I've ironed it so that it is ready to go for the printing process. Now we need to make our printing paste, and that is going to be in the form of iron. Now, how do you get iron or ferrous sulfate? If you've been watching this channel for a long time, you know that I have a recipe here on how to simply make iron water using rusty nails and vinegar. That process takes a couple of weeks for the nails or rusty metal to interact with the vinegar to create an iron water. It's a great homemade recipe to have iron water handy, and you can continue to replenish it with nails and vinegar and water to keep it going for a very long time. The one drawback to using iron water that's homemade like that is that you don't really know the percentages of the iron itself. That may not be an issue for you, but if it is, you may decide to use a ferrous sulfate powder. That's what I have here. I get mine from Botanical Colors. You can find them online as well because they are used in different types of applications outside of natural dyeing. There are two very important points to know about using ferrous sulfate powder. One is that it has the ability to sort of drift around when you're using it, and anything that has tannin on it will interact with it. So if you have places on your surfaces where bits of powder have floated out, you're going to want to avoid putting any tannin fiber on it because it'll show the spots. And so you're going to want to be very cautious, protective of your surfaces. Make sure you wipe anything down before you put your tannin fiber on top. The second thing, obviously, is that it's in a powder form. So when you're handling it, wear a mask until it becomes a solution in water, and gloves will help in case there's irritation that you may find with your skin when you're handling it. So those are two things just to keep in mind. I used to only use homemade iron water. I have switched now to using ferrous sulfate because there's a lot of efficiencies in using it, but either one in this case will work beautifully. Now, as we've been working on printing projects over the last month or so, you've seen me use a homemade printing pad. This is a wonderful option. It allows your fiber to be pinned to it so it doesn't move. And when you're printing, you don't want your fiber to move around, otherwise you risk putting the printing paste in places that you might not intend to. If you go back to some of the previous videos, you can see how I built my own very inexpensive printing pad. I also have suggested that if you don't want to go through that process, you can simply tape your fiber to the surface of your counter or wherever you're working. In today's video, I'm going to use that process just so that you see a different way and know that you don't have to go through the process of creating your printing pad. However, if you're going to be doing a lot of printing, it's probably worth taking the time and effort to make your own printing pad or invest in one. As I've mentioned, mine probably cost a grand total of $10. I was able to make it a custom size, and I'm pretty happy with it. But today, let's just simply use painter's tape, and we'll tape our fiber down to a surface. Now, with the printing we've done so far, we've been using soy milk as our binder, and that is somewhat thicker than what you're seeing here with the ferrous sulfate solution. So adding just a quarter teaspoon to that 50 millimeter bath of gum tragacanth will give it a little bit more strength so that it hopefully won't run terribly into the fibers around where I do the printing. So feel free to use that. You can also try gum arabic or guar gum and find a consistency that works for you. Now, I don't mind that I'm going to have some bleed, but I'd like to try to maintain at least some of the round shape. So I'm going to press very softly and try not to add too much of the iron paste so that I can avoid too much of a run into the fibers surrounding where I print. So I'm going to be using just these very simple sponges. They are going to take quite a bit up, and so I'm going to want to blot them, which is just here on a piece of foam and just an old sheet here, so just a piece of cloth. I'm going to be dabbing it to try to get a nice amount onto the sponge, not too much, not too little. Here is my ferrous ready to go. So let's start making our prints. right, I printed and I'm pretty happy. The bleed is relatively slight, still there, but you're still getting that nice circular shape in a sort of polka dot design. I'm going to let this completely dry. Once it dries, I'm going to throw it into a soda ash / washing soda bath and then place it back into the dye pot. This is going to be short soaks, just 5 minutes in that bath of soda ash or sodium carbonate, and then into the tannin for about 10 or 15 minutes. It does not have to be hot, so I'm just going to place it right back in the cold tea and let that soak, and then you will magically see how much darker these colors turn out where I've printed. We can then rinse it and hang it to dry, and then we have this wonderfully printed iron tannin design. So here is the finished product. I'm pretty happy that we got a pretty good round design here. There was some bleeding as I expected, but it wasn't too bad actually. I did notice that I had a few areas where little dots of iron came through, which means I had somewhere on here, probably on the surface, a little bit of iron that migrated. So just beware, that can happen really easily. Again, I don't mind it, but just know that it's a possibility. So let's look at this compared to what we've done so far. There is our soy milk as paint, our soy lime resist, and then our soy that we used with earth pigments. So they all look really cool. They're connected by their shape and color palette, but now I have these 4 beautiful napkins. So how about that for yet another way to create patterns on fiber using natural materials. I now have 4 beautiful napkins, but I want to add one more. So next week, why not join me and let's see if we can use the power of lemon to actually remove iron to create a reverse pattern, or what's known as a discharge. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see you again next Friday here on Color Quest. We are going to what I want to say. The one thing, 2 things about, there are 2